Welcome to the Heart Rate Variability Podcast, where we explore the exciting science behind heart rate variability. The material discussed in this podcast should not be taken as medical advice. Please check with your medical provider to make sure any suggestions or strategies are right for you. Visit us at the OptimalHRV.com website to learn more about the Optimal HRV app, download a free copy of Matt's book, Heart Rate Variability, and also get show notes and additional resources around heart rate variability and its applications. Welcome, friends, to the Heart Rate Variability Podcast. I got Ina today, and I'm really excited to talk about one of the impacts that Ina and initially her book, before I got to meet her and now call her a colleague and friend, was healthy breathing. I remember, Ina, I think it was like maybe even chapter 1, if not chapter 2 of your book. I read it and my morning mindfulness practice has never been the same. I was doing an inhale, exhale equal amount of times, and I immediately changed that to add a few seconds on the exhale part. So since it had such a huge, just immediate impact on my practical morning mindfulness practice, I thought it'd be great to share with our audience with this. And so I would love to maybe start out with oxygen and carbon dioxide, because I would, like most people thought, you need that big inhale because we must have oxygen. And I would love for you to share a little bit of information that really had me really look at that thinking as maybe not quite being exactly what's going on the inhale and the exhale.
Yeah, that's a really great question, Matt. There is a pretty major misconception out there with regard to both oxygen and carbon dioxide that often keeps people breathing in inefficient ways, or even ways that actually create a problem rather than solving a problem. Yeah. So you're right. A lot of times people think that in order for them to feel calmer or to do better or to relieve anxiety or to, get better, to prevent pain, etc., they need more oxygen. And that is actually, just physiologically speaking, not true. The only time you need more oxygen is if your activity level is increasing. If you are, if your activity level remains about the same, then the oxygen that you have is plentiful. The oxygen you're taking in with each breath, right? So the air you're taking in with each breath contains 21% oxygen. And the air you're breathing out contains about 15-16% oxygen. So you're using only a quarter of the oxygen that you take in, meaning you have plenty of oxygen. You have quite a bit of reserve. So even if your activity level is increasing a little bit, you still have plenty of oxygen. You don't need any more. And your body cannot absorb more oxygen than 100%, right? Once the oxygen comes into your bloodstream, it binds to hemoglobin to be delivered, throughout the organs and tissues. Your hemoglobin cannot be more than 100% saturated. It is just physiologically not possible. So all that oxygen that doesn't get bound to hemoglobin gets exhaled. So again, long story short, you have plenty of oxygen.
Yeah. So what does that, can you tell, because here's where I really felt ignorant as somebody who's studied breathing probably more than most folks. What do we do with that? What's that hemoglobin do with oxygen? Because I think when you think big, we're breathing, we're getting energy in some way. And I know oxygen plays a role in that. So let's break it down to the simplest level of, what's that oxygen doing in the first place?
Well, oxygen provides basic fuel for our cell function, right? In order for your cells in any part of the body to do whatever it is they're designed to do, they need to have oxygen, right? So you breathe in oxygen, it comes in through your nose or through your mouth, ideally through the nose. gets down through the respiratory tract to your lungs, gets absorbed into the bloodstream. And once oxygen enters the bloodstream, it binds to hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is part of your red blood cells, and that is designed to carry oxygen and other gases around. So oxygen comes in, binds to hemoglobin, hemoglobin picks it up and transfers it throughout the body, releasing it to various parts of the body, depending on the metabolic needs of that particular organ or tissue. Once the oxygen is released, it enters the cell and it is used by that cell for energy. And as a byproduct of that, of metabolism for that cell, the cell produces carbon dioxide and water. And that gets spit back out into the bloodstream for redistribution or for expulsion from the body.
Great. So the carbon dioxide, with again, my thinking, and I'd love for you to expand on this, because what you just described was sort of, even though I could not have gone nearly that technical or that quickly to give a great explanation on it, is carbon dioxide fully only a byproduct, almost a waste product of the kind of the energy system with oxygen you just described? Is that what carbon dioxide, we need to get it out? Or does it have maybe a deeper function in this whole complex process?
Yeah, that's another misconception that is extremely prevalent and kind of gets a little bit dangerous out there. Yes, so you're right. Carbon dioxide is a byproduct of metabolism. Most of the carbon dioxide in the human body is produced in the human body as a byproduct of metabolism, because the air we breathe in contains very, very little carbon dioxide, virtually none. There's a tiny bit. So most of the carbon dioxide is produced as a result of metabolism internally. And the misconception is that it is a waste product and that it is toxic. While it is true that we don't want to have too much carbon dioxide, it's actually fairly difficult to get too much carbon dioxide. The problem comes in when we don't have enough. We need to reserve 85 to 88% of our carbon dioxide for pH regulation. Right? So a huge majority of our carbon dioxide needs to stay within the body. We only need to get rid of 12 to 15% of it. Wow. And this is the big misconception, right? If you were to put carbon dioxide human body into Google, you will get all sorts of websites and messages saying, this is a waste, it's toxic, you need to get rid of it, you need to cleanse your body and things like that. And that is not true and dangerous, because when your CO2 levels are too low, it messes with your pH level. That's the acid-base balance in the body, which is extremely important for proper physiological function. And if we don't have enough carbon dioxide, our physiology gets really messed up. We don't get enough oxygen. Our muscles don't work properly. We can get really tired. Some of the metabolic byproducts in our body might not be getting expelled properly. Your gastrointestinal tract may not function properly. Your brain does not function properly. So all sorts of issues happen if we don't have enough carbon dioxide.
So that was one of the shockers. It's like carbon dioxide was just always sort of an afterthought. And all of a sudden, like, I'm reading your book and I'm like, wait a minute, this is actually crucial to healthy functioning. So let's go into that. I think probably all of us remember pH from maybe a high school biology, those strips that we put in to different things. And if you made me tell you what it is, before reading your book, I'd have no idea. So let's go to that, because that was one of those things that kind of relearning what the heck pH was and its link to carbon dioxide really kind of helped me understand this in a deeper way. So can we focus in on that with the carbon dioxide pH? Why should I care about pH and the pH levels in my body?
Absolutely. So pH refers to power of hydrogen. That's kind of just what it stands for. And what it tells us is how alkaline or how acidic your blood and other fluids in your body are, right? This is, pH when it comes to the human body. Obviously, pH applies to all sorts of other things. pH can be neutral. pH of 7 is neutral, and that is distilled water, not necessarily tap water. But distilled water is neutral, has a pH of 7. When the pH is lower than 7, that means that the substance is acidic. And when the pH is higher than 7, that means that the substance is alkaline. And the human body needs to maintain its pH level somewhere between 7.35 and 7.45, so slightly alkaline.
Okay.
And it's a fairly narrow range. The tricky part is your body pH level is determined by only two things: carbon dioxide and bicarbonates. Bicarbonates are regulated by the kidneys, and kidneys do not do anything about your pH level, for at least 8 hours, sometimes, even a day or more. Whereas your carbon dioxide is regulated with each breath. So your breathing is one of the main regulators of pH, and has a very large impact because every breath can change your pH level.
So let's knock something out that I saw a little bit in the research that, like, drinking lemon juice in the morning creates an alkaline, maybe. I was doing this for a while because I was reading things, and I love to try things. Anything we should worry about with that? Like, should we be trying to create through maybe diet? Because I want to get back into breathing, but is there anything to this research about lemon juice and pH, or anything that you see, sort of on these certain health websites of the benefits of lemon juice in the morning and other things as far as pH levels?
So I'll be honest with you, I have not looked at the research specifically as it relates to lemon juice, but there are two different kinds of pH regulation here. There is metabolic pH, and that is produced internally through the body, and that one has to do with your nutrition and which foods are broken down, how, and there is something to that, absolutely. It's a bit outside of my area of expertise, so I will leave that to another expert to talk about. But then there is a respiratory metabolic states, and that's respiratory pH, and that is where your carbon dioxide comes in, right? So your carbon dioxide, is obviously regulated through respiration, and this is where you might get respiratory alkalosis or respiratory acidosis, depending on what's going on with the breath.
Okay, so with this understanding that the carbon dioxide plays this central role, the big inhales, like, and I've been, like, from a mental health perspective, if you're getting stressed out, take a deep breath. What should we be thinking about with this understanding that carbon dioxide and oxygen are both really central to healthy functioning? One of the things I love about the breath, whether we're talking the autonomic nervous system or pH levels, is it's sort of the one thing, if we focus on, we have some access to this mostly unconscious sort of regulatory systems in our body. So when we start talking about, okay, how should we breathe to sort of maximize the research we're talking about, help us understand sort of the inhale, exhale with this oxygen, carbon dioxide stuff that you've been educating us on.
Yeah. So what matters, as far as the mechanics of your breath, is the size and the rate of the breath, right? The volume of the air that you're taking in and how fast you're breathing. And we want to have a balance, right? If you're breathing more deeply, you need to breathe more slowly. If you're breathing more shallowly, then you can breathe faster. And that has to do with the balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Whatever amount of air we breathe in, the same amount of air gets breathed out, right? So if we're taking in a very, very large, deep breath, that same volume of air is going to have to come out. And with a large volume of an inhalation, yeah, you are getting volume-wise a lot of oxygen. But as I mentioned, you're only using, as much as you can use. You cannot get any extra in, no matter how big a breath you take.
Yeah.
So all that extra oxygen and that same volume of air gets breathed out. Right? And by the way, most of the air you're breathing in is nitrogen. There is 21% oxygen and 78% nitrogen, and there's a little bit of carbon dioxide, helium, and things like that. So nitrogen is completely neutral, to the body. It's inert. We don't do anything with it. Just breathe it in, breathe it out. You use the oxygen. So in that volume of air that you are breathing in, if you've taken in much greater volume than you need, than you're going to use, in order to exhale it properly, you have to exhale it really, really, really slowly. And for a lot of people, that's hard. Yeah. Because, I'll demonstrate, to take a really big deep breath, the way that people typically do when they're told to take a deep breath, I'll show you just how slowly you need to exhale. And I could probably even keep going a little bit more. Right?
I was trying to do it with you, and
that's a really, really, really slow exhalation. Most people don't know they need to do that. A lot of people can't do it. And if you're trying to take deep breaths when you're already stressed, you're really not going to be able to exhale that slowly.
Right.
So if you end up exhaling faster, then what you're doing is breathing out more carbon dioxide than your body is producing. You're lowering the amount of carbon dioxide that's being retained in your blood.
Fascinating.
Which messes with your pH level, right? So carbon dioxide is acidic. In the blood, is dissolved as carbonic acid. If you breathe out too much carbon dioxide because you've taken in too big a breath and you breathed it out too fast, that lowers acidity of your blood, right? So that makes your blood too alkaline, right? Your pH goes up. And that sends the wrong message to your hemoglobin, right? Your hemoglobin distributes oxygen based on your pH level. That's how hemoglobin knows when to release oxygen. What is your pH level? If your pH level is slightly acidic, hemoglobin knows, okay, your metabolism has increased. You need more oxygen, so let's release more oxygen. And if your pH level is acidic, hemoglobin interprets that your metabolism has decreased. You don't need as much oxygen. And, if your activity were actually higher, right, and which means that your metabolism is higher, your body is taking in more oxygen, your body is spitting out more carbon dioxide into the bloodstream, making your blood more acidic, then hemoglobin is correct that, you need more oxygen, let's deliver more oxygen. And if your metabolism decreases, you go to sleep. You do not use as much oxygen, you do not produce as much carbon dioxide, which makes your blood more alkaline. And then hemoglobin correctly interprets that, okay, you don't need as much oxygen, so let's not release as much oxygen. Right. So those two scenarios are good. But if you're trying to take a big, deep breath in order to calm down when you're feeling stressed, right, your metabolism doesn't change. Your metabolism is the same, normal everyday metabolism. But you take in a really big breath, you breathe out that breath really fast, your CO2 levels drop, your pH becomes too alkaline, and that incorrectly signals the hemoglobin that you've gone to sleep, right? Remember, your metabolism hasn't actually changed, but your hemoglobin thinks that you've gone to sleep, and now hemoglobin does not release sufficient oxygen. So in an effort to get more oxygen, because you're stressed, right, and you think you need more, you actually end up oxygen deprived, because what you've done is breathed out too much CO2, and that prevents oxygen from being released from hemoglobin. So your oxygen is going around, you have plenty of it, it's going around, in your bloodstream bound to the hemoglobin, but not being released sufficiently. And you're now oxygen deprived and feeling worse than you were to begin with.
Wow. So, okay. So kind of one question, and then I want to lead us into some of the education that you gave me in your book about how we kind of optimize healthy breathing. So at this point, are we seeing any impact on heart rate variability? And I guess then leading that into how do we breathe? Because I'm assuming a healthy pH balance will show up in a higher heart rate, positive heart rate variability. So kind of tying HRV up to this point, and if we're not really seeing much impact there, how do we kind of maximize this science for healthy breathing?
Yeah. So those are two related mechanisms. Obviously, they're all both within the human body, but they're not directly connected.
Okay.
So it is actually possible to increase your heart rate variability through breathing while being oxygen deprived. Now, you're not going to feel right, because the way we increase HRV is through slowing down the breath and getting the breath close to resonance frequency breathing rate, which is somewhere between 4 and 7 breaths per minute. So just the process of slowing down the breath will start increasing your HRV. So people who slow down their breath while taking in too big a breath and breathing it out too quickly, they might be overbreathing, they might be oxygen deprived, but the process of slowing down the breath will still raise their HRV. So you may not necessarily know this because you don't really know how much someone's HRV will increase with slowing down the breath, right? It looks like it's rising, so that looks good.
Yeah.
But it's possible to have that underlying overbreathing going on. Most of the time, people will know it because they're going to feel bad. They're going to start feeling dizzy. They're going to feel lightheaded. That tends to be the first signal. You could be feeling short of breath. Your heart might be pounding. Your fingers, your hands, your toes might feel tingly. Your stomach might get upset. You might feel a little bit kind of, like you're watching yourself, from above, type, derealization. Situation might be hard to think straight, hard to focus. The severity of these symptoms really depends on the severity of overbreathing, but the lightheadedness, it tends to be the first signal. So if someone is doing their HRV breathing and overbreathing, their HRV might go up, but they'll feel bad doing it.
Yeah.
And if with proper respiratory physiology, over time, HRV will certainly be healthier than if someone continues overbreathing every time they train, or if they overbreathe at baseline, because that is not good for our nervous system. Overbreathing is not good for your nervous system. Right. There's just not that direct relationship where, if you overbreathe, your heart variability doesn't go up. It will. But most of the time you'll know that you're overbreathing because you'll feel it.
Gotcha. Okay, let's spend the rest of the time that we have here. What is healthy breathing? I know we have, and we'll have an episode I can't wait to have on residency frequency and exploring that. But just like with how do we breathe in a healthy way, maximizing all of this science that you've given us in this episode?
Yeah. So the breathing skill itself is actually fairly simple and likely not that different from what you're already doing. I'll describe it in a moment. But a couple of things that I think are just really important to keep in mind when you are thinking about healthy breathing. If you're going to do a breathing exercise, if you're going to practice breathing in a challenging or stressful situation, or in a situation where you'd like to reduce the intensity of whatever is happening, or if you'd like to calm down or relax, breathing is a great way to do it. Just a few things to keep in mind. You do not need more oxygen for any of these activities, right? Unless if you're increasing activity, you're exercising, you're going for a run, fast walking, etc. Yes, different story. Overbreathing still applies. We can talk about that some other time. But you do need, and you do use more oxygen in situations, where we're just feeling stressed, overwhelmed, anxious, would like to calm down, would like to relax, would like to get to sleep. Your metabolism is not increasing, and therefore you do not need any extra oxygen. So the emphasis should not be on the oxygen. The emphasis needs to be on distributing that oxygen properly. And for that, we need to retain a vast majority of our carbon dioxide. With healthy lungs and healthy heart, we do not need to worry about having too much carbon dioxide. you would have to really hold your breath, and you would really know that you are overdoing it in order to have too much carbon dioxide. So we're not talking about breath holding here. So you don't need to worry about having too much carbon dioxide. You do not need to worry about not having enough oxygen. Again, assuming you have healthy heart and healthy lungs. With certain lung or heart disease, again, the concept of overbreathing applies, but there are a few other considerations there, making sure that you are getting enough oxygen. For most people, if we don't have to worry about it, give yourself permission not to be concerned with whether you're getting enough oxygen. Focus on optimizing your carbon dioxide. So you do not need a particularly big or deep breath. Again, because you do not need extra oxygen. And what we want to do is take a normal size inhalation, and then we want to extend our exhalation. This way we'll breathe out the carbon dioxide over a longer period of time. So you'll breathe out the same amount of CO2 just over a longer period of time, therefore allowing your body to make more as you breathe it out, and therefore maintain a steady level of CO2, allowing the oxygen that you do have to get distributed properly.
Okay, let's break that down for a little bit. So on the exhale, the extended exhale, which is what I sort of immediately applied to my mindful breathing practice before work each day, we're not breathing out more carbon dioxide. We're just spreading out the exhale over longer. It just so we sort of bring everything together. Let's why is that important? I think it connects everything you've talked about, but just for folks like me who are trying to process this, that longer exhale, what is that doing with the hemoglobin and all this stuff that we've talked about?
It allows you to preserve a steady level of carbon dioxide, right? So as you are breathing out your carbon dioxide, your body is making more, right? So you're overall maintaining a steady level. You will breathe out what you need to breathe out, right? So you're going to breathe out that 12 to 15% that you don't need. And you're going to allow the 85 to 88% of your CO2 to stay inside, which will maintain a pH level between that 7.35 and 7.45, which is what you need, which will signal, your hemoglobin to release appropriate amounts of oxygen. So your exhalation is really important in order for the oxygen that you have, in order to get distributed in a way that in the most optimal way. So to get the oxygen going to where you need to go, you want to maintain steady levels of CO2.
Awesome. So I know we'll hold off talking about residency frequency breathing rates. Is there any advice outside of that for someone who may not have thought about residency frequency? Is just like, oh, I've heard this, I might be breathing wrong. What should I do? Maybe I'm in the car. Maybe the car is a bad idea. But like, what sort of practice can people do? Is there sort of a universal way we can think about this before we get more into clinical aspects of RF breathing rates?
Absolutely. So keeping in mind those precautions that I just mentioned, let me show you a breathing practice that will feel good to most people. It will minimize the chances of overbreathing, and it will kind of provide that state of calmness, if that's what you'd like. It's a nice way to prepare your body for facing whatever challenge might be happening. So this breathing is called low and slow breathing. We're going to shift the breath from the chest down to the belly. That's the low part. We're going to slow down the breathing. That's the slow part. And then we're going to take a normal size, comfortable breath in, right? Remember, there's no need for a deep breath. Right? So you can imagine, just taking a breath in as if you're smelling a flower. So it's going to be a little bit slower because you're shifting the breath to the belly, right? It's going to be a little bit deeper, but your body will take care of the depth all on its own. You do not need to make your body take a deep breath. Right? So just normal size breath in as if you are smelling a flower. And then you're going to breathe out through the nose or through pursed lips as if you are blowing out a candle, allowing your exhalation to be full and longer than your inhalation. And since you didn't take a particularly large inhalation, your exhalation doesn't need to be exceedingly slow. So this will feel a lot more comfortable. And so you can try that again. Normal size breath in and then exhale. If you can breathe out slowly through the nose, that's great. That can actually be healthier. But if it's hard to breathe out slowly through the nose, then breathing out through pursed lips is a nice way to do it. It gives you just a little bit more control over airflow. It tends to make this a little bit easier for people.
Awesome. Well, I was so excited to have this conversation because we're going to, in future episodes, expand on this. But to me, this science was so foundational. It just kind of knocked off a lot of misinformation that is in popular culture about breathing, the stress response, and things that I've misinformed people of because I was taught wrong around this. So Ina, I really appreciate this. As always, you can find show notes at optimalhrv.com. And Ina, thanks as always. And we'll see everybody next week.
Thank you so much, Matt.